It was a typical sunny afternoon in Los Angeles when Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur behind Tesla, SpaceX, and a handful of other ventures that seemed to change the world every few months, found himself walking down a street he never thought he'd be on. The bustling sidewalks of LA, with their endless streams of luxury cars, tourists, and tech moguls, seemed to hum with an energy that Musk had grown accustomed to. But today, something felt different. Maybe it was the weight of a recent business decision, or perhaps the overwhelming scale of his latest space exploration project. Either way, the world he had built was beginning to feel a little more distant, disconnected, even. As he turned the corner, something caught his eye. There, on the sidewalk, sitting against the cold concrete wall of a high-rise building, was a man. His clothes were tattered, his hair long and unkempt. The man, an older veteran by the look of him, had his eyes downcast, seemingly lost in thought. His face was weathered, deeply lined by time, and yet there was a sharpness in his gaze that seemed to cut through the chaos of the street. Elon had seen many people like him, especially in a city as large and diverse as Los Angeles. But there was something about this particular moment, something about this man, that made Elon stop in his tracks. The veteran raised his eyes to meet Elon's, and in that instant, the world seemed to slow down. The homeless man, without a hint of hesitation, spoke, his voice a rough rasp from years of struggle. "You think you're better than me because you have all that money? What's the point of owning everything if you can't even change the lives of people like me?" Elon blinked, caught off guard by the directness of the question. In that moment, he realized the man wasn't just asking about his wealth. It was deeper, an accusation, perhaps a challenge. The street noise, the chatter, the honking cars, the chatter of tourists, it all seemed to disappear. It was just him, standing there, staring at a man who had clearly lived through more hardships than he could imagine. Without knowing why, Elon found himself walking closer to the man. "What do you mean?" Elon asked, his voice softer than usual. He wasn't used to being challenged like this. No one ever dared ask him questions like that. The veteran shifted slightly, his gaze never leaving Elon's. "I've seen wars, son. I've seen what happens when people with power choose to ignore those who've given everything for a country that forgets about them. You've got the money, the power, the ideas that could change the world. But you still pass by people like me every single day." The word struck Elon harder than he expected. He had built companies that promised to revolutionize the world. He was the man who had sent rockets into space and put electric cars in every driveway. But here, standing before him, was a man who had served his country and been abandoned. A man who had given everything, yet had nothing in return. Elon's mind raced. The veteran wasn't just talking about himself. He was speaking for all those who had been left behind, the ones whose struggles were invisible to the world's elite. The silence lingered for a moment before the veteran added, "Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Maybe you can start by hearing my story. You might learn something." Elon didn't respond immediately. His mind was reeling, trying to process the weight of the words that had just been thrown at him. He had always seen himself as someone who was pushing humanity forward, someone who wanted to solve big problems. But in this moment, standing before a man who had no home, no hope, and no one to rely on, Elon couldn't help but feel like he had missed something crucial. This wasn't just about technology or wealth. This was about people. Real people. People who had fallen through the cracks of society. Before he could think further, the veteran added one last thing. "What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?" Elon stood there for a long moment, the question echoing in his mind. Could he answer it? As the afternoon sun blazed overhead, Elon Musk made a decision. Maybe this encounter, this very strange moment, was the push he needed. Maybe it was time for him to confront the uncomfortable truth. The world he had created, for all its innovation and grandeur, had left too many people behind. And maybe, just maybe, he could do something about it. The challenge had been thrown. It was time to respond. Elon Musk wasn't always the confident, almost untouchable figure he was today. Beneath the suits, the billion-dollar companies, and the headlines that followed him everywhere, there was a boy who had once struggled to find his place in the world. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, Elon had a tough start. He was a quiet, introverted child, often lost in his thoughts. His classmates bullied him, calling him names, pushing him around on the playground. It wasn't uncommon for him to feel like an outsider, misunderstood and alone. But it was in those early years of isolation that Elon's mind began to work differently. While others were out playing sports or hanging out with friends, Elon would often retreat into books or computers, finding comfort in the logic of science, the possibilities of technology. His father, Elon Musk, was a successful electromechanical engineer, but their relationship was distant. Elon never felt the love or approval that many children took for granted. His father's cold, authoritative nature only pushed him further into himself. His mother, May, was a model and dietitian, and though she was supportive, her own career and struggles left little room for the kind of emotional support Elon needed. By the time Elon was a teenager, his home life had become untenable. The tensions with his father escalated, and the family dynamics grew increasingly strained. Elon left South Africa at the age of 17, heading to Canada to attend Queen's University. He had no real plan except to escape. But even in Canada, life didn't offer an easy route. Elon worked multiple jobs to pay for his education, struggling to make ends meet. He had big dreams, but no clear path to achieve them. His work ethic, combined with his ability to think outside the box, earned him a scholarship to the University of Pennsylvania, where he began studying physics and economics. It was here that Elon's vision of the future began to crystallize. He didn't just want to be a part of the world. He wanted to change it. He saw the future of technology and energy not as a distant dream, but as an inevitable reality. His passion for space exploration, electric cars, and renewable energy became his driving force. But even as he achieved these ambitious goals, something deep within him kept nagging at him. A feeling that all his success and innovations meant little if they didn't address the fundamental problems people faced on the ground. That's where the veteran on the street came into the picture. Elon's thoughts drifted back to the homeless man as he walked to his car, still processing the encounter. He had spent his entire career creating things that seemed to promise a better future for the world. But in the face of this man, this homeless veteran, all of his accomplishments felt distant and hollow. The man's words resonated in his mind. You've got the money, the power, the ideas that could change the world. But you still pass by people like me every single day. Elon had always seen himself as someone who could tackle the world's greatest problems. He had dreamed of making life multiplanetary, of creating a future powered by sustainable energy. Yet, here was a problem right in front of him that no rocket ship could solve, no electric car could fix. This wasn't a problem in the distant future. It was happening right now, and it was something that no one, not even Elon Musk, had the perfect answer for. What had driven him all these years? What kept him pushing boundaries and taking risks? Was it the thrill of innovation? The promise of fame? Or was it something deeper? Elon paused, looking out over the LA skyline as his car rolled through the streets. The city below, full of people going about their lives, seemed to embody the very divide the veteran had pointed out. The wealth, the technology, the success, it all felt so distant from the reality of so many others. Elon thought back to the early days of Tesla and SpaceX, when people doubted him, when he had no money, no guarantees, only an unshakable belief in his ideas. That same determination that had led him to launch rockets into space and create a sustainable future for transportation was now being tested. He had always believed that innovation could change the world, but perhaps this was the moment when he needed to innovate in a new way, not just with technology, but with human connection. What good was his empire of companies if it didn't extend a hand to those who needed it most? He could feel the familiar fire of determination building inside him again. But this time, it was different. The stakes weren't about sending a car to Mars or putting solar panels on every roof. This time, the stakes were about making a real, tangible difference in the lives of people who had been forgotten. Elon glanced at the street sign in front of him, Veterans Memorial Drive. The irony wasn't lost on him. How had it come to this? How had a country that promised to take care of its veterans allowed so many of them to fall through the cracks? As his car turned onto the freeway, the hum of the engine became a rhythmic background to the thoughts swirling in Elon's mind. He had always been the one to disrupt industries, to break down barriers. But the real disruption he needed now wasn't in the world of technology. It was in the very way society viewed and treated its own. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do yet, but something was different now. The conversation with the veteran had ignited something inside him, a new kind of vision, one that went beyond profit and innovation, one that was about empathy, compassion, and finding a way to make the world better for everyone. As he drove, he couldn't shake the question the veteran had asked him. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? And for the first time, Elon Musk thought he might have just found the answer. Elon spent the next few days in a daze, his thoughts consumed by the conversation he'd had with the homeless veteran. The world he had built seemed suddenly smaller, less important compared to the larger, undeniable truth that had been presented to him. The question that had been thrown at him, that challenge, was not one that could be easily ignored. He'd always prided himself on solving problems that others deemed impossible. He had revolutionized the automotive industry with Tesla. He had launched a private space company, SpaceX, into orbit. Yet, in that moment on the streets of Los Angeles, Elon realized that all the rockets, all the electric cars, and all the innovations in the world couldn't change the harsh reality facing those who had been forgotten. The veterans, the homeless, the people living in the cracks of society. Elon wasn't naive. He knew the world was full of problems. But the question the veteran had posed to him shook him in a way that no business deal, no technological breakthrough ever had. He had everything: wealth, power, influence. But what was it all for if it didn't help those who truly needed it? But where did he begin? What could someone like him do for the people who had been left behind by society? He wasn't a politician. He wasn't a social worker. He was an engineer, a technologist, a visionary who focused on making the impossible possible. Could he apply the same approach to something as complex as homelessness? And what about the veterans who had fought for their country only to return home to lives of neglect and suffering? The first step, he knew, was to listen. But as he thought about his next move, he felt a growing tension inside him. His mind raced with the possibilities of what he could do: fund a charity, start a foundation, build shelters, create a new initiative. But each solution felt too small, too surface level compared to the magnitude of the issue. The more he thought about it, the more frustrated he became. His thoughts were interrupted by a call from his assistant, Karen, who had been trying to reach him all morning. "Elon, we've got the meeting with the board in 2 hours. They're waiting for you to present the new Mars colonization timeline," Karen reminded him. Elon sighed, running a hand through his hair. The world of SpaceX, of rockets, spaceships, and missions to Mars felt so distant now, as if it were in another lifetime. He had big plans for Mars, big plans for electric cars, big plans for the future. But in that moment, it all seemed irrelevant. The veteran's words echoed in his mind, drowning out the usual hum of his business world. "Yeah, I'll be there. Just give me a few minutes," he said, already distracted, his mind still grappling with the lingering question that had become his obsession. As the meeting approached, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that the conversation he'd had with the veteran was a turning point. He had been on the fast track for so long, pushing his companies forward, changing the world in his own way. But now he felt pulled in a different direction. A part of him wanted to focus all his energy on space and technology. But another part of him, the part he couldn't ignore, knew that his legacy couldn't just be about rockets and electric cars. It had to be about making a real, human difference. The tension inside him continued to build as the meeting began. His team gathered in the boardroom, discussing timelines, budgets, and potential future launches. Elon's mind, however, was far from the discussion. The words of the veteran had disrupted his ability to focus. How could he continue to work on his next rocket launch when so many people in his own country were struggling to survive? How could he stand in front of a group of brilliant engineers and investors and talk about Mars when, right here, there were people, veterans, the homeless, families, who needed help? A voice broke through his thoughts. "Elon, we're ready for your input on the Mars project," one of the engineers said, looking at him expectantly. Elon blinked, pulling himself back into the moment. He couldn't ignore the tension inside him, but he pushed it aside for the time being. "Right," he said, giving a half-hearted nod as he began to talk through the projected timelines and advancements for the Mars mission. But as the conversation continued, Elon felt more and more disconnected. His mind kept drifting back to that street corner in Los Angeles, to the challenge the veteran had posed to him. The tension was almost unbearable now. He was pulled between two worlds. One where he was building rockets that could change humanity's future, and the other where people like the veteran were slipping through the cracks, left behind by a system that promised to take care of them but failed to deliver. The meeting went on for another hour, and Elon struggled to focus, his mind continually tugged by the weight of the moral dilemma he now faced. Should he continue building his empire and keep pushing forward with his vision for space exploration and electric cars? Or should he shift his focus and find a way to solve the much more immediate problem of homelessness and veterans who had been forgotten? Finally, the meeting ended, and Elon excused himself. His team had no idea of the internal turmoil that had been brewing in him. They were focused on Mars. They were focused on the future. They didn't see the urgency that Elon now felt about the present. The world he had been so determined to change was slipping away from him in ways that his companies could never fix. As he walked back to his office, Elon made a decision. He couldn't keep going down this path without addressing the problem that had been brought to his attention. He would have to find a way to use his resources to make a real difference in the lives of those who had been left behind. But what would that look like? How could he turn his power and influence into a force for good, for those who needed it most? The tension inside him wasn't going away, but for the first time, it felt like the beginning of something new. It wasn't just about rockets or electric cars anymore. It was about using everything he had learned, everything he had built, to fix the systems that were failing the very people who needed help the most. The question, he realized, wasn't just about what he could do. It was about how he could do it. And that, he knew, would take more than just a business plan. It would take a completely new way of thinking. The days following the board meeting were filled with an unusual energy. Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted within him. The tension between his two worlds, the world of high-tech innovation and the world of human suffering, had become unbearable. The conversation with the homeless veteran in Los Angeles had awakened a part of him that had long been dormant. It was as if he had been moving at lightning speed through space and technology, but now he was being called to ground himself and focus on the very people he had inadvertently left behind. That Saturday afternoon, Elon found himself standing in his office, staring at a whiteboard covered with projections for the next Mars mission, electric vehicle designs, and solar energy strategies. But none of it felt as urgent as it had before. He had always been driven by the idea of creating a better future for humanity, but now, the future felt distant. What mattered more was what was happening right now, on the streets of his own country, to the veterans who had served and the homeless who had nowhere to go. He reached for his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in a long time. His mother, May Musk. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice sounding different to his own ears. "I need to talk to you about something." "Of course, Elon. What's on your mind?" May's voice was calm, always steady, and always supportive. "I've been thinking about something for a while," Elon began, pacing the room as his thoughts spilled out. "You know, I've spent my entire life focused on technology and space, trying to push humanity forward. But lately, I can't help but feel like I'm missing something. Like all this progress means nothing if we're still leaving so many people behind." May paused, sensing the gravity in his tone. "What do you mean, Elon?" "Homelessness. Veterans. There are so many people who have nothing, who have given everything and received nothing in return. And I think I can do something about it. But I don't know where to start." His voice broke slightly, something Elon wasn't accustomed to. It was a rare moment of vulnerability, one he hadn't shared with anyone. May, ever perceptive, picked up on his tone. "You've always wanted to change the world, Elon. Maybe this is where you can start. You've disrupted industries before, so why not this? It won't be easy, but you're one of the few who has the ability and resources to make a real impact." Elon took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his mother's words settle over him. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was the moment to channel all the drive he had used to disrupt industries into something more personal, more immediate. "I'm not sure what it looks like yet," Elon admitted, "but I have to do something." I've built companies to revolutionize the future. Now, maybe it's time to use that same mindset to fix the systems that are failing people right now." As he hung up the phone, Elon knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. He didn't have a clear answer, but he was determined to find one. The future had always been his focus, but now, the present was calling to him. He could no longer ignore the problem that had been placed in front of him, the same problem that had haunted his thoughts for days since his encounter with the veteran. The people he had overlooked were waiting for someone to step up, and perhaps for better or worse, that someone was him. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Elon gathered a team of trusted colleagues from Tesla, SpaceX, and even SolarCity to begin brainstorming ideas. He didn't just want to throw money at the problem. He wanted to create a sustainable, lasting solution. He wanted to disrupt the systems that allowed homelessness and poverty to persist in the first place. The team worked late into the night, hashing out plans that combined Elon's passion for technology with his desire to help those in need. He couldn't help but think about the intersection of innovation and social responsibility. Could he use Tesla's electric technology to power low-income housing? Could SpaceX's logistics know-how be used to streamline the distribution of essential resources? Could his experience in revolutionizing industries be applied to solving one of the world's most persistent problems? But even as he threw his energy into these plans, the questions kept coming. What would real, lasting change look like? How could he ensure that he wasn't just throwing more money into an already broken system? Elon wasn't interested in a temporary fix. He wanted to fundamentally change the way society treated its most vulnerable. Late one evening, as he walked through the empty hallways of his office building, realization hit him. The answer wasn't just about creating more tech-driven solutions. It was about community. It was about connecting the wealthy and the powerful to the people they had neglected. It was about using the privilege and resources that came with success to build something sustainable, something that could bring real change to the lives of the people who had always been forgotten. He called a few of his closest advisors, including a veteran from his early business days who had now become a social entrepreneur, to discuss an idea that had been forming in his mind. "We need to start with community-driven solutions," Elon said, his voice carrying the weight of conviction. "The problem isn't just about the lack of housing or resources. It's about the lack of connection, of opportunity. We need to build systems that empower people, not just give them handouts. We need to create programs that provide jobs, housing, and the chance to rebuild a life." The conversation stretched late into the night as Elon and his team laid the groundwork for what would soon become a major new initiative, one that combined his passion for technology with a deep commitment to social responsibility. By the time the sun rose, Elon felt a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in years. He was no longer just a man focused on building rockets or electric cars. He was a man who was ready to confront the very problems he had once ignored, the problems that now seemed more urgent than ever. In that moment, Elon Musk knew that this was just the beginning. His journey to make a difference in the lives of those who had been left behind had only just started, and he was ready to take the first step. The early morning sunlight poured through the windows of Elon's office, casting long shadows across the room. His mind was buzzing with ideas, each one more ambitious than the last. The initiative he had started conceptualizing over the past few weeks had now taken shape. What he had once considered an abstract thought had become a driving force in his life. He couldn't sleep, couldn't rest until he had a plan, until he was sure that this time, the solution would be lasting. He called a meeting with his senior leadership team that afternoon. The topic wasn't Mars or electric cars or new solar innovations. Instead, it was a problem that had captured his thoughts entirely: homelessness, veterans, and the failure of systems that were meant to protect them. As the room filled with Tesla executives, SpaceX engineers, and a few outside advisors who had been brought on for their expertise in social reform, Elon stood up, facing them. There was no time for pleasantries. His tone was urgent, but focused. This wasn't just another business venture. It was personal. "We all know I've spent my life creating and improving technologies that change the way we live," Elon began. "But it's become clear to me that despite all our progress, there are still people living in the cracks of our society. I'm talking about the homeless, the veterans who have served our country, the families that have fallen through the system. And it's time to change that." The room fell silent. It wasn't unusual for Elon to come in with bold ideas, but this this was something else. He wasn't just talking about building a new car model or launching a new rocket. He was talking about using everything Tesla, SpaceX, and his other companies had to offer to address an issue that had long been ignored by society. I want to create something that doesn't just give people a place to sleep, Elon continued. I want to give them opportunities to rebuild their lives, to integrate into society, to regain their dignity. This has to be a long-term solution, not a temporary band-aid. His vision was both grand and simple: build communities that combine technology, innovation, and social responsibility. Affordable housing that was powered by renewable energy. Smart homes designed not just for shelter, but to help people thrive. Job training programs, mental health support, and a full ecosystem of services that could help individuals get back on their feet. But Elon knew that ideas alone wouldn't be enough. He had seen countless well-meaning projects falter because they lacked proper execution. He needed to put together a detailed, actionable plan, one that could actually make a difference. We're going to use everything we have, Elon said firmly. Solar City can help with sustainable energy. Tesla can provide the technology to power homes. SpaceX has the logistics know-how we'll need to distribute resources efficiently. And most importantly, we will leverage our networks to ensure this is not just an experiment, but a model for the rest of the world to follow. The room stirred as his team processed the magnitude of what he was proposing. Elon wasn't known for backing down from a challenge, but this was different. This wasn't about building an electric car that could revolutionize transportation. It was about solving a human crisis, something that would require not just technology, but compassion, creativity, and an unprecedented level of collaboration. How do we make sure this works? One of the engineers asked. Elon paused, his eyes scanning the room. It's going to take a lot of work. We need a dedicated team of experts who understand the social systems that are broken. But more than that, we need to connect with the people who have been living on the streets, the veterans who feel abandoned. We need to listen to them, understand what they need, and what they're missing in the system. This is not just about us solving their problems. It's about giving them a seat at the table. A silence hung over the group for a moment, then one of the advisors spoke up. You're asking us to do something that's never been done before. No one's taken on homelessness at this scale. How can we make sure it's sustainable? Elon nodded. That's why we have to start small, test the model, iterate. But we don't start by simply building homes. We start by building a community. The people who will benefit from this need to feel that they're part of something bigger. They need to see that we're not just offering charity, we're offering opportunity. He looked at the team, his gaze steady and determined. I'm going to meet with organizations that have been working on these issues for years, veterans groups, homeless shelters, social workers, and learn what's been done and what hasn't. Then, we'll design a scalable solution that makes use of our technologies, but most importantly, puts people first. The team exchanged glances, the enormity of the challenge setting in, but also the excitement of being part of something truly revolutionary. They had followed Elon into the unknown before, and now, they could see that they were on the edge of yet another unprecedented venture. This time, however, the stakes felt different. This was about more than just innovation for innovation's sake. It was about real lives, real change. The following weeks were filled with long hours of planning and research. Elon met with veterans groups, social justice organizations, and experts in the field of homelessness. The more he learned, the more he realized just how broken the system truly was. Bureaucratic red tape, lack of funding, and a lack of coordinated services had left many of the most vulnerable without help. And for the veterans, it was even worse. Many of them were suffering from PTSD, mental health issues, and the trauma of war, only to return to a society that didn't know how to care for them. It wasn't just about providing housing. It was about understanding the root causes of homelessness, addiction, mental health struggles, and the failure of institutions that should have been there to support them. But Elon's approach was unique. He didn't want to just throw money at the problem. He wanted to transform the entire system. And then, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, as he was walking out of his office, he received an email from a nonprofit organization focused on helping homeless veterans. The subject line read, "A veteran's plea. Help us build a future." Elon opened the email. It was a letter from the very veteran he had met in Los Angeles, the one who had challenged him on his path, the one who had sparked this entire movement. The veteran had written about his experiences living on the streets, his struggles with getting proper care, and his hopes for the future. He didn't ask for money or pity. He asked for a chance to rebuild, to become part of a community that didn't see him as a statistic, but as a person worthy of respect. Reading that letter, Elon knew this was no coincidence. This was the push he needed. This was the sign that he was on the right path. It was time to act. The first steps were about to be taken, and this journey would be unlike any other. The first meeting with the veterans' nonprofit organization was held in a small conference room in downtown Los Angeles. Elon had already set the wheels in motion, calling in some of his most trusted advisors and even a few of his engineers to sit in on the discussion. They were ready for this to be more than just an idea. They were about to make the first tangible steps toward a project that would shake the foundations of social reform. As Elon entered the room, he was greeted by the organization's leader, a former Marine named Jack who had spent the last decade helping fellow veterans find stable housing, employment, and mental health support. His eyes were intense, but his handshake was firm and warm, a sign of the camaraderie he had built with those in need. "Mr. Musk, it's an honor to meet you," Jack said as they exchanged greetings. "The honor is mine, Jack," Elon replied, his gaze fixed on the veteran. "I've been learning a lot about what's being done and what isn't, and I'm here to see how we can help make a real, sustainable impact." Jack nodded slowly, then gestured to the others in the room, a mix of veterans, social workers, and advocates. "We've been working for years to connect homeless veterans with the resources they need. But what we see more often than not is that the system isn't set up to support them in the long run. Housing is just one piece of the puzzle, and even then, it's a temporary solution. They need community. They need support systems that understand their unique challenges." Elon leaned forward, his fingers interlaced as he processed Jack's words. "I've been thinking about that," he said, his voice steady but passionate. "The key here isn't just about providing housing. It's about providing opportunity. And not just for veterans, but for everyone who's fallen through the cracks. A true community can't just rely on temporary fixes. We need to reframe the approach entirely." Jack raised an eyebrow. "How do you propose we do that?" Elon's eyes brightened. "What if we built a self-sustaining community powered by technology? Homes that are energy efficient, powered by solar panels and renewable energy. Job training centers for veterans to learn new skills, places where they can work and earn a living. Social support systems that address mental health, substance abuse, and reentry into civilian life. This wouldn't just be housing. It would be a complete ecosystem that empowers people to take control of their lives again." The room was quiet for a moment as everyone took in Elon's words. The idea was bold, even by his standards, but it was also visionary. No one had ever proposed something on this scale before. This wasn't just about charity. It was about creating a new, sustainable way to approach homelessness and veteran care. Jack was the first to speak. "It sounds like what you're suggesting is not just a shelter, but a new way of life. A way for veterans, for the homeless, to rebuild from the ground up, not just get by. But it's huge. It's everything we've dreamed of. But we'll need a lot of resources and a lot of buy-in from others. Do you really think you can make this work?" Elon's smile was faint but confident. "I've built companies that others thought were impossible. I've made what seemed like science fiction a reality. This isn't any different. It'll take time, and we'll need the right partnerships. But I believe we can make it work." They spent the next few hours mapping out a plan, identifying the resources they would need and the partnerships they'd have to form to make the vision a reality. Elon wasn't content to simply build a few homes and call it a success. He wanted a blueprint that could be replicated nationwide, one that could solve the problem of homelessness at a systemic level, using the power of innovation to create lasting change. As the meeting came to a close, Elon stood up, shaking hands with each person in the room. Jack pulled him aside for a moment. "I have to say, Elon, I wasn't sure what to expect when I heard you were coming here," Jack admitted. "But you're not just talking the talk. You're ready to walk the walk. I think you might actually change the game for veterans and for everyone else who's been left behind." Elon looked at him, a quiet determination in his eyes. "I hope so, Jack. That's exactly what I intend to do." In the weeks that followed, the project began to take shape. Elon's team at Tesla, SpaceX, and his other companies quickly mobilized, bringing in experts in construction, energy, social programs, and even community building. The plan was ambitious: to create a self-sustaining community for veterans and homeless individuals, one that would offer more than just shelter, but a pathway out of poverty, despair, and isolation. They identified a small parcel of land on the outskirts of Los Angeles, an area that had been largely ignored by city planners. Elon saw potential there, a blank slate where they could create something entirely new. The land would become the first pilot project for their vision, a tech-powered, community-driven haven for those in need. Tesla would provide solar-powered homes, each one designed to be energy-efficient and cost-effective. Solar City would ensure that the entire community was powered by clean, renewable energy. SpaceX's logistics expertise would be used to streamline the distribution of resources, from food to medical supplies to job opportunities. But beyond the technology, beyond the physical infrastructure, Elon knew that the true power of this initiative would come from the community itself. He envisioned workshops where veterans could learn new skills, whether it was coding, carpentry, or even running a business. He imagined a support network that would help veterans, the homeless, and others find their footing, offering not just housing, but a future. Elon's team worked tirelessly, pushing the boundaries of what they had previously done. Every day, there were new challenges: technical, financial, and social. But Elon's vision was clear, and it kept him and his team motivated. Then, one afternoon, as Elon stood on the land where their project would soon rise, he received a call from Jack. His voice was filled with urgency. "Elon, you won't believe it. We've already had veterans coming forward. They've heard about the project, and they want in. We're talking about people who've been living on the streets for years. They want to be part of this new community. They want to build something real." Elon felt a surge of emotion. This wasn't just about his vision anymore. It was about real people, taking ownership of their future. The project was no longer an abstract idea. It was becoming a living, breathing community. "That's incredible, Jack," Elon said, his voice thick with emotion. "Let's make sure they know they're not just getting a house, they're getting a chance, a real shot at a new life." As the weeks passed, more and more veterans and homeless individuals expressed interest in being part of the community. The foundation was being laid, not just for homes, but for hope. And Elon Musk was ready to do whatever it took to make this dream a reality. The project was moving forward faster than anyone could have anticipated. The once barren plot of land outside Los Angeles was now bustling with activity. The hum of construction equipment filled the air, and teams of engineers and workers collaborated tirelessly to bring Elon's vision to life. The first phase of what would become a self-sustaining community was underway, and the buzz of excitement was palpable. It was as if the land itself was coming alive with the promise of change. Elon spent most of his time on site, overseeing the progress and checking in with the teams. But he was also meeting with the very people who would one day call this place home. Each conversation brought new insight, new ideas. Veterans and homeless individuals who had been living in shelters or on the streets for years now saw a glimmer of hope, a real opportunity to rebuild their lives. One day, as Elon walked through the construction site, he encountered a man named Peter, a former Marine who had been living in a local shelter for several years. Peter had heard about the new project through one of the veteran organizations Elon had partnered with, and he was eager to get involved. "I've been on the streets for too long," Peter said, his voice rough but determined. "I can't keep living like this. I want to work, to contribute. I want a chance to do something with my life." Elon looked at Peter with understanding. This wasn't just about putting up walls and roofs. It was about creating an environment that empowered people to take ownership of their futures. "We're building more than just homes here, Peter," Elon replied, his voice steady. "We're building a community, and we need people like you, with your strength, your determination, to make it work. This isn't just for you. It's for everyone who's been left behind." Peter nodded, a look of quiet gratitude on his face. "I want to help build it. I don't just want a roof over my head. I want to help others who are in the same situation." Elon smiled. "That's exactly what we're looking for. We're going to offer job training, support, and the opportunity to contribute. You'll be a part of something bigger than just this place, You'll be part of a movement that's going to change lives. Peter's eyes sparkled with hope. Thank you, Elon. This is everything I've dreamed of. As Elon continued to walk through the site, he saw more faces like Peter's. Men and women who had spent years fighting battles, whether on the streets or within themselves, now had a chance to rebuild. The excitement in the air was tangible, but Elon knew that this was just the beginning. They had only scratched the surface. Back at Tesla's headquarters, Elon was having a meeting with his leadership team to review the next steps. The project had been moving at a rapid pace, but there was still so much to be done. The technology, the logistics, and the social services had to align perfectly if the community was to succeed. Elon needed a team that could pull all the pieces together. I'm confident in what we're building, Elon said, addressing his team. But we need to ensure that the systems we're implementing are scalable. This first community is just the start. We have to make sure that everything we do here can be replicated across the country and eventually globally. One of his senior engineers, Sarah, spoke up. The solar-powered homes are nearly ready. We're using the latest technology from Tesla's solar division, and the energy efficiency will be off the charts. But we also need to consider how we're going to integrate mental health services and job training into the community. Elon nodded thoughtfully. We need to bring in experts who can handle the mental health aspect. And for job training, let's start by collaborating with local businesses. If we can create partnerships with companies that are willing to hire people who come from this program, it will help ensure long-term success. The conversation shifted to logistical concerns, how to handle food distribution, medical care, and other essential services. Elon had always been one to think about the big picture, but now, more than ever, he was focused on the details. This project wasn't just a test run. It was a blueprint for changing the way society approached homelessness and veteran care. We're not just creating a shelter, we're creating a thriving ecosystem, Elon said, determination in his voice. We can make this work. If we get it right here, we can scale it to other cities. And eventually, we can offer this solution to the entire country, maybe even the world. As the meeting wrapped up, Elon felt a surge of purpose. The road ahead would be challenging, but he had never been one to shy away from a difficult task. This was a fight worth fighting, and he was ready to lead it. Back on the construction site, the first of the solar-powered homes was being completed. It was sleek, modern, and designed to be as energy efficient as possible. The homes were compact but comfortable, with space for individuals or small families. Inside, there were training rooms, community kitchens, and spaces where residents could access mental health services and job counseling. Peter, along with a group of other veterans and individuals from the homeless community, was hard at work alongside the construction crews. They were building the community from the ground up, brick by brick. It was more than just construction. It was a sense of purpose. The people who were once on the margins of society were now taking pride in what they were building. They were creating something that would last, and something that would change lives. One afternoon, as Peter took a break from his work, he walked up to Elon, who was overseeing the progress of the project. Elon, I have to say, I never thought I'd see a day like this, Peter said, his voice thick with emotion. I never thought I'd be here, working on a project like this. But it's not just about the work. It's about what we're doing here. We're building more than homes. We're building hope. Elon looked at him, his expression serious but filled with conviction. That's exactly what this is about. It's about giving people like you a chance to rebuild your life, to help others rebuild theirs. You're a part of something that will change the world. As the sun began to set over the construction site, casting a warm glow over the new homes, Elon took a deep breath. He knew that the challenges were far from over, but in that moment, he felt the weight of the responsibility and the power of what they were doing. This wasn't just a project. This was the beginning of something that would ripple through communities across the world, bringing with it the promise of a brighter, more hopeful future for those who needed it most. And Elon Musk was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. The dream was taking shape, but the journey ahead was not without its struggles. The first few months after the groundbreaking were filled with progress and optimism, but now, as the project grew in scope, new challenges began to emerge. Challenges that could derail everything. Elon had always expected setbacks. They were inevitable in projects of this scale. But what he didn't expect were the invisible forces pushing back against him. The bureaucratic red tape, the legal hurdles, and the skepticism from some of the very communities he sought to help. The success of the project depended not only on innovative technology and a bold vision, but also on winning over city officials, local residents, and even the veterans themselves, some of whom were still skeptical about the promises made. One morning, Elon found himself in a meeting with the mayor of Los Angeles, a woman named Linda Chambers, who had been supportive of the project in its early stages. However, as the project progressed, her position began to shift. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, Elon," Linda said, her tone cautious. "But there are significant concerns that can't be ignored. This is a massive undertaking. The city is already facing its own housing crisis. We need to be careful not to add more pressure to our already stretched resources. How can you guarantee that this will actually work on a larger scale?" Elon leaned forward, his fingers tapping on the table, a sign of his growing frustration. "I get it. I understand the concerns. But this isn't just about housing. It's about creating a self-sustaining community. We're not asking for handouts. We're offering the tools people need to take control of their lives again. This isn't just for the homeless. It's for the veterans, for the people who've been ignored by the system for far too long. We're going to build a model that can be replicated across the country." Linda was silent for a moment, weighing his words. "And what about the veterans who don't want to be part of this? You're creating a community where they can live, yes, but what if some of them don't want to be helped? You can't force people to change, no matter how good the system is." Elon's eyes hardened. "You're right. But what I've learned in this process is that it's not about forcing change. It's about offering a chance, a real chance. Some will take it, some won't. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try." Despite Elon's passionate arguments, Linda wasn't fully convinced. "I'll be watching this closely, Elon. I hope you're right, but there are a lot of moving parts here. And if things don't go as planned, the consequences will fall on all of us." While Elon dealt with the politics of the project, the reality on the ground was becoming more complex. The first residents of the community, veterans and homeless individuals, were starting to move into their new homes. However, it wasn't as smooth a transition as they had hoped. For some of the veterans, the idea of a stable life was foreign. They had lived on the streets or in shelters for so long that the concept of stability felt uncomfortable. Some of them struggled with mental health issues, PTSD, or substance abuse. Even though the community offered counseling and support services, the change was jarring. Peter, who had been one of the first veterans to join the project, was helping others adjust to their new lives. But even he struggled. The sense of isolation, the feeling of being trapped by his own past, crept back in at times. He had been excited about the opportunity to rebuild his life. But now that he was here, in a new environment, it felt like everything was moving too quickly. One evening, as Elon toured the community, he noticed Peter sitting alone on a bench, looking lost in thought. He walked over and sat beside him. "How are you doing, Peter?" Elon asked, his voice gentle. Peter looked up, his face tired but thoughtful. "I'm doing all right. I'm adjusting. But I won't lie, it's hard. It's hard to shake off years of living on the streets, years of feeling like I didn't belong anywhere. I want to believe that this is the right place for me, but sometimes it feels like I don't even know who I am anymore." Elon sat quietly for a moment, letting Peter speak. He knew that the road to recovery wasn't a straight line. The change they were trying to bring was monumental, and not everyone was ready for it, no matter how much they wanted to succeed. "Peter, I can't imagine what you've been through," Elon said finally. "But what I do know is that this community, this project, it's not just about building homes. It's about creating a space where you can rebuild at your own pace. There's no rush. You don't have to be fixed overnight. But I believe in you, and I believe in the people here." Peter gave a small, grateful smile. "Thanks, Elon. I think I needed to hear that." As the months passed, the community continued to grow. New residents moved in, and more homes were built. But the challenges were far from over. As the project expanded, so did the pressures. Elon's team faced mounting obstacles, technical issues with the solar systems, delays in construction, and, most frustratingly, resistance from local residents who were wary of the new project. One day, Elon received a letter from a local neighborhood association expressing concerns about the project. They worried that the new community would lower property values, attract crime, or create further strain on public services. Elon had anticipated this kind of opposition, but it still stung. The vision he had for a better world was facing its first true test. Determined not to back down, Elon called an emergency meeting with his team. We need to find a way to engage with the local community, show them that we're not here to disrupt, but to improve. We need their support if we're going to scale this model. He turned to Sarah, who had been overseeing the outreach efforts. What can we do to get people to understand what we're trying to do here? Sarah suggested, what if we hosted a community day? Let the people in the area come and see the work we're doing firsthand. Have the veterans talk about their experiences and the impact this project has had on their lives. We need to humanize the issue, not just present it as another development project. Elon nodded, a spark of inspiration lighting up his eyes. Let's do it. We'll open the doors and invite them in. Let them see that this isn't just a building project, it's about people, and it's about change. It was a gamble, but it was a gamble that Elon was willing to take. He knew that the road ahead would be filled with more obstacles, both seen and unseen. But he also knew that every step forward, no matter how small, was a step toward creating the world he envisioned. The day of the community event arrived, and despite the mounting pressure, Elon felt a surge of hope. This was the moment where the work they'd poured their hearts and souls into could finally be shared with the world. The sun was shining brightly over the new community, and the air was filled with a sense of anticipation. The first of the local residents, as well as the surrounding neighborhood's community members, had started to arrive. Elon stood near the entrance of the community center, greeting people as they entered. He'd anticipated skepticism, but what he hadn't expected was the sea of curiosity that had flooded in. A group of families, neighbors, and even local business owners had come to see what all the fuss was about. Some looked uncertain, others more hopeful, but there was an undeniable buzz of conversation in the air. The space was filled with residents, veterans and their families, local workers, and those who had once found themselves displaced, now proudly showing visitors their homes, their jobs, and their lives as they were being rebuilt. The veterans themselves were playing a central role, leading tours of the homes, sharing their stories, and telling visitors about how this project had given them a second chance. Peter, who had once been one of the most skeptical, was now a proud advocate for the community. He had embraced his new role not just as a resident, but as a mentor and leader within the community. His eyes had that same fire of determination Elon had seen in him months ago, but now there was a calm to his demeanor, an understanding that rebuilding wasn't a race, but a slow and steady journey. Walking alongside Peter, Elon could feel the energy shift in the crowd. It wasn't just about the homes, the technology, or even the high-tech solar panels that powered everything. It was about something deeper, human connection. Peter spoke with visitors about the importance of community and how each individual had played a role in helping each other find their way back. We all have our own battles, our own stories, Peter said, his voice strong, yet carrying an undeniable vulnerability. But what makes this work is that we don't have to fight alone anymore. We have each other, and we have a place where we can rebuild. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. Elon stood quietly nearby, taking in the moment. Watching Peter speak, he was reminded of the larger vision, the one that had driven him to start this project in the first place. It wasn't just about solving homelessness or giving veterans a home. It was about transforming the fabric of society itself, creating a new type of community, one based on empathy, support, and empowerment. As the event continued, more visitors were drawn in, stopping by various booths set up around the community center. There were spaces showcasing job training programs, health services, and technology-driven solutions for the future. Local businesses were there, too, showing their commitment to hiring from the community. The message was clear. This wasn't a project that operated in a vacuum. It was part of a broader ecosystem that included partnerships, growth, and shared responsibility. By the time the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the homes, the community was buzzing with conversation. It wasn't just the visitors who were engaged. Many of the residents were interacting with one another in ways that hadn't happened when the project first started. The isolation that had once defined their lives was beginning to dissolve. Peter caught Elon's eye across the crowd. He smiled, a wide grin that stretched across his face, and walked over to him. "You were right," Peter said, his voice full of gratitude. "This place, it's changing everything. I've been here for months, but today, it feels real. It feels like this place is home." Elon nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's only just the beginning, Peter. This model is something that can be replicated anywhere, but it only works if everyone believes in it. And it starts with people like you, people who have lived it and can share their stories." Peter's face softened. "I'm just one person, but I know I've got a lot to offer. I want to make sure others get this chance too. I'm ready to do whatever I can to help." Elon placed a hand on Peter's shoulder. "And you will. You already are." Later that evening, as the event wound down and the last visitors trickled out, Elon took a moment to stand on a small balcony overlooking the community. The lights of the homes twinkled below him, and he felt a sense of pride swell inside. It was still early in the project's life, and there were countless obstacles ahead. But in that moment, as the night sky stretched out above him, he couldn't help but feel that they had accomplished something significant. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting a final golden light across the community, Elon's phone buzzed. It was a message from Linda Chambers, the mayor of Los Angeles. "I came by today. I saw the progress. I saw the people. I've been skeptical, but now I see it. I see what you're trying to do here. We're on board. Let's talk about next steps. Let's make this happen." Elon smiled. For the first time, it felt like the entire city, and maybe even the country, was starting to understand what they were building. It wasn't just a housing project, it was a vision for a better future. A future where communities took care of each other, where veterans, homeless individuals, and anyone who had been left behind could find their place again. As he headed back inside to join the rest of the team, Elon felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. This was more than just a project. It was a movement, a chance to rewrite the narrative of what it meant to be part of society. And though there was still so much work ahead, he knew one thing for sure. This was the beginning of something bigger than any one person or any one project. It was a new chapter, not just for those who lived here, but for the world. Elon Musk had always been a visionary, but now, in this moment, he was a part of something even greater. A chance to reshape society, one home, one community at a time. And he was ready to see it through, no matter what.